Hello there, and we're back with some more Punching, the compilation of the Act 3. Right off the bat, you're probably going to notice something a little bit different. This video is a lot shorter than the other two, and it came down to me thinking about what's the point of them. And it's just a recap, right? To give you a few hints here and there. If you really want to watch the actual fights, you can just check out the videos in which the fights are in. So in the background, you're going to see at the moment just some rares that are part of a quest, but as we go along, you're just mostly going to see combat, and I'm just going to be talking through it. For the most part, we haven't found much upgrades during this act, and the bosses here have been very challenging and in various ways that were different from the way Act 1 or Act 2 were, where it was strictly, oh, we couldn't survive it, or oh, we were dying. Which was very interesting that Act 3 had new surprises for me. But anyway, as we're talking, you're going to already see that I am fighting the monkey boss. He wasn't particularly difficult because we ended up going MOM. And MOM is extremely powerful. It's just another life pool. Even with a little bit of regen, it's really strong. We also have our recoup as always. We have our damage server, and obviously we are only allowed to use our punches, right, or any damage and effects that come from our punches. And I was actually initially worried about this fight because this boss likes to move around a lot, and he has a lot of one-shot kill mechanics, even with the MOM. But I realized that I could kind of use these trees to kind of block him. So I do have to tank a few of the hits here and there, but if I'm really worried, I can dodge away a little bit here and there and then reposition, or I can dodge through the trees and he simply can't hit me and I can reposition from there. The next reason of why these trees are really useful is because when he moves around, he also aggroes a lot of nearby enemies, which becomes a real big problem, right? Especially if I'm already barely surviving certain hits. Because then I have to kill them, and then I gotta make sure I manage his attack, and then we can just move all over the map, just me trying to kill him. And the fight does take a while. We don't really have that much damage. We did do a little bit of farming beforehand, as you will notice in this video. It's a little bit skipped, but it was just a campsite where we managed to quickly get some chests. And we just farmed them over and over and over. We didn't really get much loot, but we gained a lot of XP, and that's gonna be a big thing here, because I think we get probably our most levels in this act, because they're just super valuable. Levels gives us a few big things. Number one, it gives us accuracy, 2 per level. Doesn't sound like much, but you know, every little bit helps. It gives us 6 mana and 12 life, I believe, which our mana are also our life pool, so both of those just increase our survivability, and then obviously the skill point, super valuable. Initially we're running a lot of energy shield, but there will be a respec eventually coming out. And as we're nearing the end of this boss, there's not much else to say. He just has a few slams. We had to dodge around. He has this weird like preemptive movement before he's about to do the main strike, so it's pretty easy to dodge. He kind of pulls back the big pillar and then he smacks you with it, and then one of his moves is where he spins with the pillar and then he smacks. But either way, fairly telegraphed, so the fight wasn't all that bad. With the conclusion of that fight, we move on to just a quick showcase of the tree. For the most part, like I said, we get a lot of recoup nodes, the MOM, we have some energy shield on the bottom. Ultimately, I will end up respecking just because there's better options, but just so you guys know what I ended up pathing. And there's been a few questions here and there about why I specifically use Wizard, and it's a callback to a Sorceress punch run I did in Diablo 2, and I just wanted to revisit it here. And yeah, it's just the reason. Ultimately, I feel like I'll eventually try other characters for this punch, and this was all done pre-Dawn patch, so before the Amazon and a few things, which actually make the game easier, so I'm curious to see how the game will actually be. Because there are things like attack speed for the base attack, which was oddly a buff for me, but not the actual punch skills, because they had lower attack speed, which was pretty funny. Then on top of that, They shortened a lot of maps, which would definitely be helpful. Bleed now bypasses energy shield, which was a big problem throughout, well, just not just Act 3, but Act 1 and 2 as well. There was also, just in general, like, things that they made change that made the game a little bit easier, because there's like the boss's life's a little bit lower. There's now a much more skill gems. So I'm very curious to try it again eventually, and I'll kind of come back to this later. But anyway, we're already in the middle of the fight with our next boss. So this is the boss that's also in the Act 3 trial that can appear. And he was actually relatively easy. He does mostly elemental attacks, right? Like, he does the ice spray, he does the fire spray, he throws down some lightning, shoots some poison. I know that's not elemental, but like just the various type damages. And then he lands on top of these stands where he can be stunned, which I honestly didn't even know if I can break them, but it ended up here and there that I can kind of get him down. Ultimately was useless just because we don't deal a lot of damage, so this fight just took a long time. It was a lot of ups and downs, but with just a little bit of maneuver, we managed to clear him pretty easily. The big thing that this unlocks is the next area, so it was kind of a requirement at this point, and it was one of the big challenges because I kind of felt like we were near a wall. The reason we were farming in specifically this map is because we had nowhere else to go, right? We couldn't beat this boss yet. Still haven't beaten Root Dredge, which was a boss. Well, it's not really a boss we need to beat, but it was just a quest boss that we can beat in the early parts of the act, and we couldn't beat anything else around us. So I decided, you know what, we're just gonna keep going until we can beat it. A few levels, a little bit of optimization and a slight gear change. Most of our gear change in this act, at least in the beginning of the act, wasn't damage based. We only got our damage near the end. For the most part, we got boosts in defenses, right? We got chest pieces here and there. I upgraded stuff like that. I don't even think I upgraded my shield, but there's not much else we can do, right? Levels was our biggest line of defense against this type of boss. But as you're seeing, he's just constantly watering us down. We recoup and then we repeat, and yeah, this is just like every other boss we've fought to this point. In fact, I got so tired of the boss that I had to pause in the middle of this fight because it gets exhausting, right? Like, your fingers starts to hurt. The big thing about these types of fight is endurance, right? It's basically a battle of attrition, right? Who caves first? Granted, the ability of pausing definitely helps, though I haven't really paused much of the fights, right? It mostly continues because I don't want them to take any longer than they really should take. But he's already going down. It's sad that we couldn't get Culling Strike. I found out later that Culling Strike is a tier 3 support gem, which means that we literally couldn't get it. I don't even think we got it at the end of the act, but we'll get to there. So yeah, we have to like whittle him down all the way to the last points, and that's usually where it's the scariest. Like, we've survived, but he can still kind of one-shot if we really don't pay attention too much. Like you probably noticed there, where I just didn't fight him during certain phases. But yeah, nonetheless, we beat him and we move forward. I think the next thing that we end up doing is the quest boss, Blackjaw. For the most part, he was more of a problem on other builds, like my first character that I've played, most because you don't really have fire resistance, right? You're not spending so much time. So if you have any kind of fire resist, this guy is pretty much a joke. I mean, there were a few times that we had to be worried, particularly his rumble and slam move, but other than that, I really wasn't worried about him. Like, as you could see, the biggest difficulty, at least for me, was his physical side, not the fire side, which was a problem for me on other characters. So that's just goes to show, like, the power of the resistance, right? So even just a little bit here and there will help you survive the fight. Other than that, I try to keep him near the pillar, you know, just so I can watch out for his slams here and there. Yeah, he wasn't much of an issue. In fact, it was actually more problematic to get to him, because at least at the time, this is before patch where they added another orb, you have to find enough orbs, and I did want to get the orb for the chests, the weird little room, secret room that they had a bunch of chests, because, you know, it's gold and stuff like that, so it was pretty valuable for us. So I ended up having to go all over the place. I actually managed to get all 3 orbs and then unlock him, and then unlocking them is also pretty difficult because you have to fight these Goliaths that just spawn randomly. Now, you don't have to fight, you can try to put in the orb fast enough, and I had to be fast enough because otherwise I'd just be standing there fighting. In fact, one of them I had to fight through 4 of the Goliaths that were standing there, and then eventually I was like done and put in the orb to open the door. But aside from that, this boss gives fire resist, I believe, which we were already, if not capped, pretty close to capped, so it wasn't a necessary thing for us. But, you know, it's still another boss that we can kill. Like, for the most part, throughout this whole, like, you know, challenge, I've been trying to kill every type of boss that was, you know, to some degree either a problem or a quest or just, you know, a thing that I remember from my first run through. And we did a pretty good job of killing most, if not all. So yeah, he's already going down. As you can see, he's doing his fire thing. Is in fact the wave where he just puts down fire and spits it out was the easiest part, because I could just go behind a pillar, dodge it, and on top of that, I can actually tank that hit. So it was pretty easy, and we move on straight from there. The next thing we end up doing was the Venom Crypt. Just for a quick moment, it was to get the mana regeneration reward. It's pretty useful, particularly since we are MOM, so it's very, very strong for us. And straight from there, we go to the trial boss. Honestly, I thought I wasn't going to be able to do the trial boss at all. And lo and behold, we have now enough damage, and we managed to get here with enough honor that it wasn't that big of a deal in the end. We had to pretty much dodge all the hits, because the explosion was really difficult to dodge. That was always going to be a thing that we generally will take. And then randomly the meteor, like not the meteors, but like from the ceiling, the stuff will fall and we maybe get hit by it, or we get hit by the random orb. So taking damage from him was kinda a thing we couldn't do, right? Like for the most part, I had to avoid him because I was already probably gonna get residually hit by everything around me, and you will notice it becomes more and more of a problem as the fight goes on. Nonetheless, we got pretty lucky in the trial. I think I've mentioned this before in a different act, but there's one that we can't really do, and that is the ritual, just because there's just so many monsters and we're definitely going to lose a lot. Maybe if we go super slow, it's just not worth it. Chalice would be the second hardest because you have to kill rares and there's a lot of time waste. The easiest would be the escape, because you just run, and then hourglass probably right after, because you know you could get hit here and there, but you can survive. And yeah, and then Gauntlet would be third. Nonetheless, we come up to our Ascendancy. I looked at all of them, and for the most part, it ended up not even being a thing that I needed to consider, because the recoup was what I needed, right? I needed more survivability. I needed time in a fight. So the first node that apparently doesn't exist anymore was just to get more recoup, right? In fact, if we could get the second node, it would have been way better. But nonetheless, with this extra amount of recoup, our survivability would go on, and I continued farming, and it was a lot easier and a little bit faster, but by no means did it solve all of our problems. So we move on from there to another boss. So this boss was actually pretty funny. You've already probably noticed that as I'm fighting him, he's not really good with melee. Like, he has a few moves that can be problematic, especially his like lightning tentacle push where he tries to slam you away, but he's not really that big of a problem for melee, especially when you get him into this corner. Because what I found is he stops doing most of his moves. In fact, I just stood in that corner just tanking every hit, because the triangle does nothing if you stand in the triangle, and everything else kind of went past us. Kind of reminds me of the Maven you know, stand still. Where if you just stand still, you kind of, you know, are okay. Same thing here. He managed to escape here a little bit from our wall strategy, I guess. But we ultimately got him back in there, and we just kept fighting. This fight, I was a bit worried about because I remember that, you know, he does a lot of moves, a lot of area type moves. So I wasn't sure if I was getting close to him. I knew he didn't have too much of a problem with the ES side, so like eventually I would take him down. But I was worried about, you know, learning about him and trying to fight him. It would probably take me a few tries. But first try on this boss. It's very rare for me to take a boss on the first try and win. Most of the boss fights you see, those are the ones I succeed. There's many that I have to learn the fight and try it out and figure some strategy out, learn their moves, change up my gear. There's like a ton of things that I end up doing just so that I can survive the fight. Most of them are minor changes because, well, we're limited on at least on the gear part. But, you know, I can change up my tactics about how to fight them. So this one didn't need to. Like, I pretty quickly saw all of his moves and then he just went down. So if any boss was easy, it was this one. Compared to all the bosses, he is by far the easiest one that I've had in this punch run. And with that, we move on to the next area, the Waterways. And there was this little rare boss that we kill. Wasn't really much of a problem. It just took a while. And the Waterways just caused its own little issues here and there. But it wasn't too big of a deal at the end of the day. Now the next part I just quickly wanted to include, just because it happened a few times, it was this screen. And the problem I had with it, it didn't disconnect me. It actually reconnected me when I tried to restart the client, and then it kept the data from before and after. So I didn't even realize that this screen existed on my videos until people commented that it was on the videos. Which was just funny that it was like that, because in all honesty, I thought that it was just cut, and I restarted from the point where it was disconnected as if I was just starting fresh. Because for the most part, I was farming at the time. I wasn't really doing much. If it was like a boss, then I would just probably restart the boss. But other than that, it was just farming. So I was like, whatever, it's not that big a deal. But it's just funny that it was there, and ultimately, I wanted to keep it in just to show that screen, I guess. I just find that screen always funny with the guy holding his head. Anyway, we move to the next area that I quickly want to show, which I probably already passed, was the Molten Vault. This area is by far the best area we've had to farm here. Not even close to any other. Like, this area has multiple chests, especially rare and blue ones, that we can access with just dodging. For the most part, we haven't really gotten stuck anywhere around here. Second, the monster types are pretty easy, with the exception of the banner guy that gives us a dot, but he's pretty rare. The other ones can be annoying because they just have a large life pool, but other than that, yeah, super easy, and then we can just go back and forth in this whole area. In fact, we go all the way to level 40, which unlocks our third socket on our punch. That is one of the big things I was waiting for, because it is a massive damage upgrade. I start to reconstruct my tree just a little bit here and there, because now I got a bunch of points. I wanted to try out the Fizz as Chaos, which ultimately didn't go anywhere, but it was a big milestone. Level 40 was just the big one. So I ended up putting Close Combat, even though it didn't show the damage. I'm sure it gave it damage because it was based on range, so maybe the UI doesn't know how to, you know, properly calculate it. But we move on to a bit of a surprise. So I was fighting this boss, the Filth Queen, and out of nowhere, we reached the limit of how many monsters can be on the map, and we ended up dying because of it. This was one of those weird fights that I talked about in the beginning, where it's now an actual DPS check, or at least we have to like figure out something more than just damage, right? Because we weren't killed by something that we can eventually survive. We were killed by something that we have to actively deal with, and that's the minions of the Filth Queen. which I didn't even know think it was gonna happen. I thought it was gonna be an easy fight because I got her in the corner, and it was fairly easy in this little corner to tank her attacks, block everything, and I thought this was in the bag. I had this, and out of nowhere, she kept spawning her minions or her children or whoever they are, and we got destroyed. But yeah, that's the Filth Queen. We'll come back to the Queen later. In the background here, we're actually fighting Root Dredge. He's an annoying boss because he explodes his minions. But with our increased survivability because of the trial and our increased damage now because of the third socket, we have just enough to kill the minions and dodge. This is a fight where we gotta actively be able to get away, because if we are stuck, the explosion from all these minions will kill us. So I will, the damage helps, the survivability helps, but ultimately we just gotta be on top of dodging. So another fight that was just a little bit different from the usual. It wasn't an important quest fight, but still somebody that was a challenge to beat. And we're gonna do a quick pause here with just showing an upgrade for our gloves, which was super late, but nonetheless it happened. Those gloves now give us attack speed and now make us fully commit into fire damage, because it gave us a lot of fire damage and not physical. It's both an up and a downside to it, but I was just finally happy to have more damage. Attack speed is a underrated mod, and eventually we will find some more exalts and stuff like that to slam on it, so those gloves can only get better. Now, you're watching in the background the Bog Witch, probably the most annoying boss of them all. The reason is because we cannot reliably break the energy shield, and maybe now with bleed bypassing it would be a little bit easier. Maybe bleed is easier to stack in general, but all we had was poison, and we didn't even have that much poison damage. In fact, I had to go back to my old gloves for just a moment because they actually gave me a little bit more poison damage, because it's based off your physical and chaos. And it took a long time because we were relying on smacking the Bog Witch during the moment where she broke off her broom, and then we can fight her. Every other time she would just get her ES back and we'd have to restart. So there was no way we were breaking it. We got close a few times where we managed to hit in between, but our movement speed's not up there either. That's the other thing that we never actually really found was good movement speed boots, which is a problem in early game. Even when we are to some degree farming, we never found an upgrade to stuff like that, because we were focusing on survivability as much as possible, and movement speed is just not offered. But aside that, you can see that this boss is just annoying. It was just me patiently punching a few times, and then if I was lucky, trying to punch in between where she would ram me. Actually, on this boss, in the few tries that I did attempt to kill her, we died because she started scaling those fire explosions to one that just kind of follows you, and then you just get a ton of stacks and you die, which really, really demotivated me. I was just shocked. I thought this boss would just go down. Sure, it's gonna take a long time, but she couldn't kill me. In fact, this boss wasn't just annoying for the fact that I couldn't kill it. She, in the beginning, before she ramped up her damage and her stuff, she couldn't kill me. In fact, for the first few attempts I had on her, the only way I can lose is if I took off gear pieces. I took off everything except, I believe, the things that didn't even do anything, like boots and my rings, because they were damaged mostly. And it still took her a while to kill us, because her attack pattern is really slow, and in the beginning, before she does a lot of the red circles, like right now, as you notice, there's just a lot of them appear around the screen. She doesn't do that much, and we could easily survive, and then obviously if she goes in her circle, we get all of our ES back, and we recharge, our flask constantly recharge, and even if we're not using them, it wasn't really an issue. So this boss was an actual soft lock to some degree for us. Right? If we couldn't take our gear off, let's say it was locked and we had to fight exactly how we were, imagine that was this game, we would be soft locked. We could turn off the game, but we would just be put back in here. Luckily, I think it would just put us at the waypoint. But it was just annoying on that regard, on that part as well. So yeah, it took a while. And one thing that I was hoping, and I kind of looked this up, but at the same time, I didn't know exactly because I looked it up on POEDB and not actual video footage. So I didn't know if there was a 25% barrier, but I knew she had other moves, and I knew it's somewhere either at the 75 to the 50% that she eventually changes over, right? There's no way she was waiting more than that to change over to her final phase, because her final phase was like this big fiery thing. And yeah, my goal was just to get there. Like right now, I basically have to vamp because we're still in the beginning of the fight. It is 10 times as fast. In fact, I'll probably make it even faster now that I'm seeing how slow it goes. And yeah, there's not much else to see. The phase where she does the red orbs everywhere, as long as you're moving, you will ultimately survive. It's not really a problem in case there's also another move where she does a bunch of spikes on your position. So just being mobile tends to be the solution against her. But in our case, I mean, considering we survived, I tried not to dodge as much as possible and do as little moves as I possibly could. Obviously avoiding just the main ones that I knew that if stacked could easily kill me. But we have finally reached it to the next phase, and we changed over from poison because we don't need to do poison, and now we can break the energy shield, and it is a whole new world for us. I was dodging more things that I needed to. In fact, the ice circle was scary to me, but I'm pretty sure it probably couldn't have killed me, but it seemed like it could do a lot of damage because it sounded like it stacked a bunch. Fairly easy, very directional, like you can easily learn the move. She does fire, you dodge. If you have any fire resistance, you basically take nothing. You can even see us. We're in the fire and we lose our ES at best. But the biggest difference is what happens when we can take her bar down. We are now killing her. Like she's dying. Now she's just even easier than a lot of the bosses we fought. This is night and day from her start. And it is crazy. But with that, we end up getting more spirit, and you probably noticed this already here and there, and it's definitely going to be a thing we do for the Filth Queen. I will now have Blasphemy on. I don't use my mana for anything other than defense, right? And I don't want to use it for anything other than defense. And then, like casting curses, you have to cast that every few so often. It's very difficult when our mana's down because we took a hit. So Blasphemy was actually the solution. We had to get a little bit of int, we had to reorganize our tree a little bit, but it was the solution for this fight. Because with vulnerability, or I believe we put flammability for this fight, and the one before we had despair for extra chaos, and before that I think I tried vulnerability. Flammability became the solution, because now we can kill the minions relatively quickly, so that even though she's kept spawning them, we would not fill up the arena. And this was super important. This was my solution, right? Because I knew that I could tank her for the most part, especially now with the extra spirit. I managed to put on all the things that was on Ghost Dance, so that, you know, vitality and clarity, so I had a little bit more survivability. So I knew that there was just like one or maybe two moves that I had to specifically watch out for. The problem was more near the end, and that is because we got locked out. We couldn't hit as much minions, and at that point, well, it was a race against time, but better than ever before. It all kind of narrows down to just a strange quirk about Punch. It actually has an AoE, and this AoE saved us a lot, and it will save us in this fight as well, because we hit multiple enemies. In fact, even when we killed the queen, you can probably even see right now that we had to fight all the minions. We were locked in there, and we had to kill them a little bit at a time. Obviously, if they swarmed us like always, we would die, and I wasn't sure if that item stays there. I believe it does, but just in case, I was just going to fight every single one of them and get our item and finally move on. And this represented a wall that we passed, because we were stuck leveling for a while to try to pass the Bog Witch, and even though she's not necessary, we still wanted to kill her for the spirit, and then obviously the Filth Queen, who was a DPS check wall type thing for us. But with that done, we move on to a relatively easy boss, but boy was he just annoying throughout this whole fight. So at first you probably don't notice much from him, right? Like he's just doing a lot of fire damage, and we have a lot of fire resistance, so this should be easy. But first thing to notice is those black hole orbs. They slow us down. So if we're stuck in them, we can't hit him. Number 2, he has energy shield, meaning if we stop hitting him, he regains all of it. And number 3, he has a phase where he goes up into the sky, does a bunch of stuff, and then when he lands, we have to hit him quick. And sometimes we catch him, right? We catch him with maybe half ES. And you think, okay, you know, that's a problem, that's annoying, but that's another thing. The problem occurs when he goes down. He can sometimes go into his next phase, which is semi-invulnerable, before we can hit him, and then he gets all of his ES back, which was so annoying because we weren't gonna die in this fight. This, like, unless we specifically just stand still and just take everything, including the black holes, it wasn't gonna happen. And then he just loved moving towards them, so that we would be like slowed every now and then, which meant that we couldn't get the hit, and then his ES start recharge before his invulnerability phase, which is even worse. And I kept trying to like maneuver him towards a corner somewhere, and a few times you could even see that I managed to get him there, but he was just not cooperating. In fact, the explosion phase, which he does more and more explosions near the end, was the best phase for us because we could now hit him multiple times. But it just proves another point, you know, fire resistance, I think, is just key. Amongst all the resistances, there's a lot of bosses here that deal some form of fire damage, and capping that resistance out early will make a lot of these bosses trivial. I don't know if it came up too much in this, you know, the race event, just because, you know, you get what you get and you kind of go on, and there's not really much of a crafting system. But eventually, with them developing more ruins and more drops and stuff like that, maybe it becomes easier to get the resistance. And I would totally suggest capping fire res and definitely getting a bit of cold early, and lightning resist definitely important. Nonetheless, you know, slowly but surely, we're gonna get this guy down. He just moves around all over the field. He can literally do nothing to us. Again, just another case of scary when you don't have fire res. Because on a mercenary, we were destroyed. Those explosions following us, I couldn't deal with it. I had to dodge. And you probably heard me talk about the mercenary before, because my mercenary had the opposite of fire res. He had negative fire. The only res I think I got was from the black one. That's it. Nothing on my gear. So with this you know, challenge, I just realized how much problems I was making. So there was a unique that dropped, but it was just useless for us. It didn't even help us. Anyways, as you can see in the background, we are fighting a boss that you probably didn't think I was gonna go to, and I didn't think I was gonna get to this boss either. This is the boss of the Act 3 trial, the Chaos trial, and I ultimately was just like, we're not gonna be able to do it. But a lot of the trials were somewhat friendly to just more survivability than damage. First trial, you kill everything, you know, you go around slowly killing everything, dodging, and eventually you'll clear it. Then the second one is similar to the hourglass. You just run around long enough and it disappears. We had to fight a little bit here in the beginning just because first time we tried it we died, but we have infinite tries on the very first trial, so that's good. And then the third one is escort, or I believe in this case we had orbs. Either one, you know, slow and steady wins the game. On our first fight we had the wind boss, which arguably is the hardest of the two by a lot. And on the second one we got this guy, which we already fought, so I knew all of his moves. And he was just as annoying, even more so because now he has a whole arena to fly around. He was just constantly going back and forth. I had to start learning how to dodge certain things. He definitely did a lot more damage than when, you know, we fought him earlier. But, you know, I knew all of his moves. His best phase was definitely the fire phase. Poison phase can probably be the most dangerous, though I guess the lightning one if you are not recouping a lot and can't take his hits. The ice phase is annoying to melee, the one in the middle. But other than that, it was pretty easy. I think the hardest part about the trial fights is more on the conditions you get. We had the blood orb constantly drop on us. I think there was another two conditions that were applied. I don't remember how serious they were, but either way, they were just more annoying than anything. Now, as for which elements he does where, he does the fire element all the way up there, he does the ice in the middle, and he does the lightning at the bottom. The poison one, he can pretty much do everywhere, but I'm not exactly sure what triggers it. Sometimes I think it's me just being too close to him that sometimes triggered it, because I don't remember him ever really doing that phase when I was far away. But then maybe it's just the reverse, because I tend to just run into the fight, so I start from far, so maybe he sees me far and then starts that move. But it wasn't often, right? Eventually I got used to it. When he did the fire phase on the top, that was the easiest. The second is probably the lightning one, just because we could just stand away from the lightning. And then eventually we got him down. He didn't drop anything noteworthy, but I was just in shock that I was able to beat him. I wasn't even sure we were going to ascend, yet alone beat the second trial. So we got a massive upgrade, and you might be thinking, like, why did I even attempt, to do the Act 3 trial, right? Like, do I need it, right? Is that why? And in fact, I did. We get our recoup now from 8 seconds to 4 seconds, essentially doubling our recoup speed, which is amazing, right? Or doubling our recoup amount, either way, however you want to put it. And the reason we did this is because we ran into a wall, and that is the Venom boss, as many of you probably suspected, because that's where I got the trial icon to use. And this was a problem because we have no chaos res. I have very little chaos res, and I ended up having to farm for it. I didn't get a lot, but it was just a necessary thing. We managed to go through the Molten Vault tons of time. A little bit for XP and a lot for gear. So much so that I even thought I can fight the Molten Vault boss because my survivability was high, I can kill things fast, we were moving quickly, and yeah, we fought him and we were doing good, we were hitting, and I thought it was going to be a problem, and ultimately, can we survive the lava? That was the main question. And as we were going, it kind of looked like we were going good. We were fighting, we were taking the hits. Now I stood in the lava, you saw, I was like, oh man, are we able to stand there and regenerate? No, we're not. I don't know if it's just a stacking thing or whatever the case, but it baited us into thinking we could. But as you can see now, I have a new tree. I took out all the ES nodes and went for more recoup, especially now that we have an ascendancy to help us out. The recoup is way stronger, and then we got our int that we needed for our curse, and then on top of that we also I believe grabbed some fire damage nodes here and there just to increase our pen, just to make sure we really get this boss down, because the next one is the problem, the Viper, as we were talking about before. There's a lot that goes into this fight, and even in just a regular setting, this boss is probably one of the hardest bosses that exist in the campaign so far. For the race, a lot of people had trouble with the Viper. This was like a wall that people had to kill, and they were stuck and they were trying to beat it. Biggest thing is chaos, right? Like I said, the poison is chaos damage. It ticks you. Our regeneration was doing pretty good in the beginning, the poison hurt, right? But at least on this try, between our recoup, a little bit of chaos, we were able to survive. The next issue is that second phase where it drops the chaos circles. The fire ones aren't that big of a deal, though. Usually we have to recoup after all the poison. For our energy shield, maybe just recharge our life a little bit. As you notice, I paused here and there just because I was trying to figure out what I was doing. And then on top of that, we also have to dodge the poison jabs that the other guys do sometimes. And if it wasn't bad enough, she also has energy shield. So I was initially thinking maybe I have to do poisoning against her. Luckily, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was kind of hard to catch her on the ES sometimes just because we were having to dodge a lot. If you're doing this fight, a few things that I've learned. Number one, the last part of all her movement abilities, you know, where she like attacks and rolls with like 20 attacks in it. The last one is the hit. So if you just wait maybe 1 second and then dodge, she will already be going in a direction and she won't really turn around. So that's a good way to dodge. The second one is when she does the little swarm things on the ground. Just stand to the side. You will take very little damage from that, especially if you have any resistance to mitigate it. The spear on the floor is the most annoying just because she likes to hover around it. So if you're ranged, obviously it's not a problem. But for me, it was just a nightmare with melee. And then the arena does get smaller. So the circles, they kind of follow you. So if you just keep mobile and look for an empty spot, you tend to be good for a second. And then the dodge obviously can dodge them if you time it a little bit better. And then lastly, the stabs. They're annoying, but a good way of doing it, which I actually learned from the racers, is you dodge into it, right? You time it, and then you dodge towards the jab, and then it can't hit you. And then during the final one, where it goes all the way down, you just dodge through it, and you're fine. You just have to be a little bit careful on your timing. And I was amazed. I was amazed at what I can do with this boss. I had to stop because this boss fight didn't take long. It wasn't me having to just, you know, survive. I had to be on top of every move, right? Because if I let up, if I let my focus wane for even just a moment, I could die. And you can see my potion and flask weren't moving too much because I really didn't need them. My recoup was working. That wasn't why I was going to die. If I was going to die, I was going to die quickly with my flask not being able to do anything. And it was my kind of my final button. Like if I need it, I pressed it, and I just hoped that it was enough, right? Because I didn't know how long this fight goes. Managing your flasks in a fight that you know will take a while is very important, right? We have charges, but you never know when you're gonna need to like spam the flask a few times, and then if you are ever caught without it, well, that's kind of the end right there, because chances are you're gonna need it. Luckily, we got through it. Our dodging, I wouldn't say it was perfect, but it was enough. It was enough that we could tank the fight. In fact, I am now better for it. This fight during the Dawn patch, where I was running the Tactician, oddly enough, it's the same similar class, wasn't even an issue. I breezed through this fight because I knew every mechanic, where to stand, how to dodge. And yeah, if you can, get Chaos Res, get regen, but it's very tough to get early. So for the most part, just evade as much of the hits as possible. And yeah, it kind of surprised me that I beat the boss, so much so that on that same day, because it was close to the Dawn patch and I was hoping I could finish the boss, is that I just decided, let's do the Act boss. And I thought we weren't going to be able to do this. And you will see it shortly why I thought we were not going to do this and kind of not be able to finish before the Dawn patch. He moves quick. He moves faster than I could hit him. I thought he was going to be a whole different issue because I didn't have movement speed, which blew my mind that this was going to be the way that we end the Act boss. I thought, it's going to be tough, it's going to hurt. No, it's just another surprise. I was trying to find for movement speed something to catch him off guard. He can't kill me. As you can see, I don't have to do anything at the moment. So I was just like, oh man, is this the end? Is this the end? And then slowly I figured out maybe I could kind of corner him. And I did it a few times, and I thought maybe I could just jam him in there. And then he started moving, so I was a little bit less hopeful. Because remember, he has ES. That's the biggest issue. If we can't break the ES bar, we would have to do the Chaos strat again. Take forever with him. And even then, considering I can't really hit him, it's going to take even longer than the Bog Witch. One thing that kind of worked in our favor, oddly enough, was that as he took damage, he started to do more and more abilities, which made him stop moving. Which is how we were able to then break his energy shield and keep his energy shield broken. Because he still tried to move. He was still faster than us by all accounts. But now we can actually hit him. And it was his own fault. If he did not decide to do any new moves, this fight would have taken forever. And in fact, he probably would have won just because I wouldn't be able to keep fighting. This was like middle of the night. The next day was the patch. There was no way I was gonna beat it before the patch if he just did that. But he decided to do more actions. That was ultimately his downfall. Now, in this fight, there are going to be multiple damage types. I believe ice is the least used, but he does use it in his second phase, as you can see. He does pretty much everything, right? He smacks you with physical. He does ice, lightning, fire. I think his gun is like chaos damage, but it might just be physical. But it could be chaos damage. It didn't do a lot either way. A few strategies that I found, obviously, is just having resistances. Resistances just helps you a lot with him. He does do some big hits. The biggest one, obviously, is when he drops down like a meteor. But in our case, this wasn't really an issue. So the ice hit and the fire ones, if you stay right on top of him and just move just ever so slightly to the side, you typically will take the smallest amount of damage, especially if you have resistances. It shouldn't be an issue at all. Like you could see, he was not even breaking our life pool, so if you had resistances, you'd be in kind of a similar situation. Maybe he would crush you a little bit more than that, but you have gear. You're not restricted by punches, so you just need to evade it for a while. The biggest issues actually came back down to the lightning one. The lightning follows you a little bit, and then the lightning spin that he does, I don't know what type of damage it is. It could be a mix of lightning and physical, or lightning and chaos. Not exactly sure. And that other one, the lightning circle, is also another lightning ability that's annoying because you have to stand next to him, so you can't really dodge well if you're ranged or squishy. But aside the lightning one, it wasn't really a problem. When he does the meteor thing, just be ready to move. It just takes one dodge. You can kind of time it. As soon as you see it's not moving, that's when you just dodge and you can quickly evade it. And then the lightning circle, you can either dodge through the lightning circle and he will just come back to the same spot he started, or you can dodge behind him and then dodge, like basically dodge through him almost, and then dodge through him again, and you can just evade that as well. The lightning gun, or whatever damage the gun does, was probably the most annoying, but it just basically meant that I have to stay mobile, which wasn't a big problem. Eventually, he started doing these moves a little bit more often, so we actually started taking more and more damage. I believe he can be stunned, so you would, or like froze. Obviously, he can be frozen and all of that, so you probably would have had an easier time. But for us, it wasn't the case. But he was easy. I didn't even consider him the boss. Really, like the first part was the scariest part. But as soon as he just started acting like a regular boss, I wasn't even fazed by him. Right? Like this is Act 2 stuff, where you're just trying to kill me with damage. And just long time. It's like even the Act 1 boss was more problematic than that. The Viper, I believe, was the boss of this act. Legitimately, it was the wall that I was worried the most about. Right? Like the Bog Witch was annoying and it took forever, and it wasn't necessary, though I definitely wanted to do it. It wasn't a wall that was a problem ultimately. Alright? Like I knew we would get through it. The Venom one, I didn't know how much Chaos Rest we would need. It ultimately we didn't need that much, right? And obviously with the extra recoup, we needed even less. But it definitely was an issue. Anyway, the boss is down. He dropped the unique. Wasn't that useful. And that's Act 3. That was basically everything. I hope you enjoyed it. It was interesting all through. There was multiple challenges throughout it. I wasn't expecting it to be so difficult. I probably mentioned this in the other act videos. Obviously, this video is probably better just because it's shorter, but I will leave the playlists for all of the act, just all of the content, and plus the acts if you want to see all of it. It was fun. It was definitely a challenge I wasn't expecting. It was just a different way to play Path of Exile 2. A lot of people were not liking that the end game was kind of stagnant. There was a lot of stuff missing. It's early access, so I kind of I do what I do to make the game fun for me, and this was definitely fun. And I was like always trying to come back to it. It's like, okay, maybe I can do it now. Maybe I can do it now. And it had its moments. It was frustrating, and we beat it. So what's next? I don't know yet. I'm probably going to take a break from PoE 2. I will do a punch challenge, most likely in Diablo, but I do want to come back to PoE 2 in one of two reasons. Number one would be to do the Dawn patch with the Amazon punch. There's a few new skills and new strategies. That would be great to do. And then maybe if they come up with acts 4 through 6. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I will try to stream more and maybe put up more content when I can. And that's the end of the punch series. Thanks for coming. Have a good night. Here's the outro.